Jack Wilson had always thought of his marriage as stable, if not idyllic. He and Lisa had been together for over a decade, sharing the joys and challenges of building a life. They had met in college, a classic love story of a young couple finding their way in the world. After graduation, they got married and settled down. Jack, a dedicated financial analyst, worked hard to provide for his family, while Lisa pursued her passion as a freelance graphic designer. They had a beautiful daughter, Emily, who was the center of their world. For the first few years, everything seemed perfect. They laughed, shared inside jokes, and spent weekends together as a family. Jack had always trusted Lisa implicitly. He never questioned her when she had to work late on a design project or when she took time to meet with clients. After all, she was a talented artist, and her business required flexibility. But over the past year, something had shifted. Lisa had started going out more frequently, late night meetings, impromptu business trips, and increasingly vague explanations for her whereabouts. At first, Jack dismissed it as just part of her growing business. She was working with new, higher profile clients, after all. But the changes went deeper than just her schedule. Lisa had become distant, both emotionally and physically. There were fewer late night talks, fewer affectionate gestures, and when they were together, her phone always seemed to demand her attention. At first, Jack tried to convince himself that it was just a phase. People go through ups and downs, and maybe Lisa was just overwhelmed with her work. He reminded himself of how devoted she had always been to their marriage, to their family. But as the weeks wore on, Jack found it harder to shake the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. There was a new air of secrecy around Lisa that he couldn't quite put his finger on. Her phone was never out of her sight. When they sat down to watch TV, Lisa would glance at her phone, smile faintly, and then quickly hide it when Jack looked over. One evening, as Jack sat in their living room scrolling through the TV channels, Lisa came down the stairs in a sleek black dress. She looked stunning, her hair perfectly styled and her makeup done just right. Jack raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You didn't tell me you were going out tonight," he said, glancing at the clock. It was almost 8 p.m. Lisa paused, almost as if she had forgotten he was there. "Oh, I've got a late meeting with a new client," she said, her voice light but with an edge of defensiveness. "A client? At this hour?" Jack asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Lisa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, it's for a big project. I really need this one, Jack." Jack nodded, not wanting to push further. "All right, be safe." She kissed him quickly on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door. Jack watched her leave, a sense of unease settling in his chest. There had been too many late meetings recently, too many unexplained absences. And then there was the way she had started guarding her phone, always keeping it with her, even in the bathroom. Something wasn't right, but Jack didn't want to jump to conclusions. He trusted Lisa, and he didn't want to believe she would betray that trust. But the nagging feeling in the back of his mind wouldn't go away. After Lisa left, Jack sat on the couch, his thoughts racing. He picked up his phone and scrolled through social media, trying to distract himself. But no matter what he did, his mind kept returning to Lisa. What was she really doing? Who was she meeting? Later that night, Jack was still awake when Lisa returned home. It was well past midnight, and she quietly slipped into the bedroom, trying not to wake him. Jack pretended to be asleep, listening as she tiptoed around the room. When he heard her phone buzz, he cracked open one eye just in time to see Lisa glance at the screen and quickly swipe away a notification. She didn't bother plugging the phone into the charger like she usually did, instead tucking it under her pillow. That was the moment Jack's suspicions became too strong to ignore. Something was going on, and he needed to find out what it was. Every late night, every smile she gave to someone on the other side of her phone now felt like a knife twisting deeper into his gut. He needed answers, but most of all, he needed the truth. The next morning, Lisa left early for what she claimed was another client meeting. Jack decided to take action. After she left, he retrieved an old tablet he hadn't used in years and synced it with Lisa's phone. It wasn't a perfect solution, but he figured it would allow him to see her messages and calls without her knowing. For the first few days, there was nothing unusual. Lisa exchanged messages with clients, sent updates on design projects, and arranged meetings. Jack felt a brief moment of relief, thinking maybe he had overreacted. Maybe Lisa really was just working harder than usual. But then one evening, a message popped up from a contact named M. Jack's heart pounded as he opened it. "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." Jack's stomach churned. His hands shook as he scrolled through the conversation. The texts were flirtatious, intimate, and filled with details that made it clear this wasn't just a business relationship. Whoever M was, Lisa was seeing him regularly. And it wasn't just an emotional affair. The messages were explicit, detailing their physical encounters, the passion they shared when they were alone. There was talk of hotel rooms, secret getaways, and stolen moments. Jack felt like he had been punched in the gut. His world spun as he processed the words in front of him. The woman he had loved and trusted for over a decade was cheating on him. Every smile, every kiss, every word she had spoken to him in the past few months now felt like a lie. He wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, but he stopped himself. If he confronted her now, she might deny it, make excuses, or worse, find a way to cover her tracks. Jack needed more information, more proof before he made his move. Over the next few weeks, Jack continued to monitor Lisa's phone. The messages with M became more frequent, more intimate. They talked about sneaking away together, making plans for weekends that Jack assumed were for work trips. Lisa would leave the house with a smile, telling Jack she had another important meeting, while in reality she was meeting up with this man. Jack's mind raced with questions. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, how could Lisa do this to him and to their family? One night, after another late evening for Lisa, Jack sat on the edge of their bed, staring at her as she slept. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, but he knew now that it was all an illusion. The woman he had married was living a double life, and he had no idea who she truly was anymore. A few weeks later, Jack's worst fears were confirmed. He had followed Lisa to one of her so-called client meetings, only to see her meet M, a tall, handsome man in his mid-30s, at a hotel. Jack watched from his car as they embraced, shared a passionate kiss, and disappeared into the hotel lobby. He sat there for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to breathe. His world was falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. When Lisa returned home that night, Jack pretended everything was normal, but inside, he was seething with anger and betrayal. He needed to plan his next move carefully. Confronting her now would only lead to more lies, more deception. He needed solid proof, something that she couldn't deny. Jack decided to dig deeper. He knew that Lisa had been unfaithful, but he needed to know how far back the betrayal went. He began reviewing their financial records, checking emails, and looking for any signs that this affair had been going on for longer than he realized. And then one day, he found it. A series of emails between Lisa and M, dating back to before their wedding. The affair had started even before they had said their vows. Jack was devastated. The woman he thought he had married had been lying to him from the very beginning. Their entire relationship was built on a foundation of deceit. Everything that he had trusted, believed in, and cherished now felt meaningless, broken beyond repair. Jack Wilson had always been a methodical man. In his career as a financial analyst, he relied on facts, numbers, and patterns. When something didn't add up, he would dig deeper, searching for the anomaly. Now he applied the same analytical approach to his crumbling marriage. The shocking discovery of Lisa's infidelity had shaken him to the core. But rather than confront her in a moment of emotional outburst, Jack knew he had to be patient, strategic. He needed to understand just how deep the betrayal went before he could make any decisions. Every day felt like walking on a knife's edge. Each moment Lisa smiled at him or shared a mundane detail about her day felt like a slap in the face. Jack no longer saw the woman he had married. Instead, he saw someone he barely recognized, someone who had managed to hide a part of herself from him for years. He had to know why. Why had she done this? Was it just lust, boredom, or something deeper? Jack spent the next few days in a haze of disbelief and sorrow, continuing his investigation. He uncovered more emails, more messages, and more meetings, everything pointing to the fact that Lisa's affair with M had been going on for years. It wasn't a fleeting moment of weakness. It was a long, calculated betrayal. Jack's nights were restless. He would lie awake next to Lisa, her breathing soft and steady, while his mind raced. His thoughts alternated between anger and disbelief. How long had this been going on? How had he missed the signs for so long? Was everything in their marriage a lie? He thought of Emily, their innocent daughter, and his heart broke. If this affair had been going on for years, how much of Emily's life had been tainted by Lisa's deceit? One morning, Jack watched as Lisa sat at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked so normal, so composed, as if nothing was amiss. She was good at this, Jack realized. Good at pretending. He observed her with a cold detachment, trying to make sense of the person she had become. Was this the same woman who had stood by his side through the ups and downs of life, who had promised to be faithful until death? The contrast between the Lisa he had loved and the Lisa who now lied and schemed behind his back was staggering. As the weeks went by, Jack's investigation grew more intense. He had already synced Lisa's phone to an old tablet, giving him access to her messages and call logs. But that wasn't enough. He needed to see the full picture. He began checking her email, scanning through old messages, trying to piece together the timeline of her affair. It was a painstaking process, but Jack was meticulous. He found messages between Lisa and her friends, particularly Katie, her best friend. The emails were lighthearted at first, talks about work, gossip about mutual acquaintances, and the occasional venting about Jack. But then something shifted. In one email thread from over 2 years ago, Lisa mentioned a new friend she had met at a gallery opening. Jack's pulse quickened as he read the message. "I don't know, Katie," Lisa wrote. "There's something about him. He's different. He gets me in a way that no one else does. It's exciting, but also terrifying. I don't know what to do." Katie's response was shockingly casual. "Just have fun with it. You deserve some excitement. Jack doesn't need to know everything. Keep it light, keep it fun." Jack's jaw clenched as he read the words. Katie had known about this from the start. She had encouraged it. Lisa had gone to her friend, not in search of advice on how to repair her marriage, but in search of validation for her affair. And Katie had given it to her without hesitation. It was as if Jack's feelings, his trust, meant nothing to either of them. The messages between Lisa and Katie continued over the months, each one more revealing than the last. Katie joked about Jack's cluelessness, and Lisa shared details about her secret meetings with Mark. Jack felt sick to his stomach reading about how his wife had spent weekends with another man, all while pretending to be away on work trips. The lies were endless, each one more elaborate than the last. Jack needed more. He couldn't confront Lisa with just messages and emails. She would likely try to spin the story, make excuses, or claim it was just emotional. He needed proof. Proof that this affair wasn't just emotional, but physical, something tangible that she couldn't deny. One night, after Lisa had fallen asleep, Jack quietly retrieved her phone. His hands trembled as he scrolled through her photos, searching for anything that could give him the evidence he needed. At first, he found nothing, just pictures of Emily, family gatherings, and snapshots of everyday life. But then, tucked away in a hidden album, he found them. Photos of Lisa and Mark taken in what appeared to be a hotel room. The two of them in bed, wrapped in each other's arms, smiling at the camera as if they had no care in the world. Jack's heart shattered as he stared at the images. There was no denying it now. Lisa wasn't just having an emotional affair. She was fully involved with Mark, body and soul. The photos were dated over the span of several years, confirming Jack's worst fears. This wasn't a fling. This was a long-term relationship, one that had coexisted alongside their marriage. Jack sat in the dark for hours, staring at the pictures, his mind racing. How had they reached this point? Was it something he had done? Had he neglected her in some way, driven her into Mark's arms? Or was this just who Lisa was, someone who couldn't be satisfied with the life they had built? In the days that followed, Jack's anger grew. He had spent years working hard, providing for his family, believing that he and Lisa were partners in life. He had made sacrifices, given up opportunities to ensure their family's future. And all the while, Lisa had been betraying him in the worst way possible. He couldn't understand it. How could she stand there, day after day, and look him in the eyes, knowing what she was doing behind his back? As he continued digging, Jack discovered more damning evidence. There were receipts for hotels, dinners at fancy restaurants, even flights for trips he hadn't known Lisa had taken. She had used their joint bank account to fund her affair, spending the money they had saved for their family on secret getaways with Mark. The sheer audacity of it all left Jack speechless. Not only had she betrayed him emotionally and physically, but she had also taken advantage of their financial security to fuel her double life. Jack's world had turned into a dark reality of betrayal, deceit, and overwhelming pain. Now, with undeniable proof in hand, he realized he had to make a decision, not just for his sake, but for Emily's future too. Jack reached his breaking point when he found the email. The subject line, "Our future," said enough, but the content inside was worse than anything he could have imagined. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," Lisa had written. "I love Jack, but I love you too. I'm torn. Part of me wants to stay with him for Emily's sake, but another part of me wants to be with you. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. I don't know what to do." Mark's response was clinical, cold in its pragmatism. "You need to decide what's best for you. I don't want to pressure you, but we can't keep living in limbo forever. If you want to be with me, we'll figure it out. But you need to be honest with yourself about what you really want." Jack's hands trembled as he read the message. Lisa had been planning an escape, debating between him and Mark as if weighing two different options. The sheer audacity, the casual way she was prepared to uproot their life, made his blood boil. The time had come for action. Jack didn't want a simple apology. He didn't want her to plead or offer some weak explanation. He wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. He wanted her to understand what she had destroyed. For weeks, he carefully planned. He met with divorce lawyers and financial advisors, ensuring that when the time came, Lisa wouldn't be able to walk away unscathed. Her betrayal wasn't just personal, it was going to cost her. And Jack was determined to be ready. Despite the burning rage inside him, Jack played the part of the oblivious husband. He pretended to be the same, smiling through dinner, kissing her goodnight, and asking her about her day as if nothing was wrong. Each moment was torture, but necessary. He needed Lisa to think she was still in control until he was ready to strike. The weeks dragged on, and Jack found it harder and harder to maintain the charade. Every touch, every smile from Lisa felt like another wound, cutting deeper into his heart. How could she be so composed, so normal, knowing the depth of her betrayal? Each passing day only solidified his decision. Lisa needed to face the consequences of what she had done. One evening, as Lisa was preparing dinner, Jack sat at the kitchen table, watching her. She moved gracefully, humming softly, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. His mind raced, knowing that tonight was the night. He had reached his limit, and there was no going back. "Lisa," Jack said suddenly, his voice slicing through the room like a knife. Lisa turned, her smile fading slightly as she saw the seriousness in his expression. "Yes? We need to talk," Jack said, his voice calm but with an edge that made Lisa pause. She set down the knife she had been using, her brow furrowing in confusion. "About what?" Jack stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. He walked over to the table and reached for the folder he had prepared. He opened it, laying out every piece of evidence he had gathered over the past few weeks: emails, text messages, photos, receipts. It was all there, every lie, every secret, every betrayal. "I know," Jack said, his voice cold, devoid of any emotion. "I know about Mark. I know about everything." Lisa's face drained of color as she stared at the incriminating evidence laid before her. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and terror. She took a step back, stumbling slightly as the reality of the situation hit her. "How? How did you find out?" she stammered, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't matter," Jack replied, his tone icy. "What matters is that I did. Now I want you to say it. I want to hear you admit what you've done." Lisa's hands trembled as she reached for one of the papers, her eyes scanning the printed text message exchange between her and Mark. Tears welled up in her eyes and her voice shook as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Jack. I never meant for any of this to happen." Jack stood motionless, watching the tears stream down her face. Her words felt hollow, meaningless, just like the trust she had shattered. He didn't care about her apologies anymore. They were too little, too late. "Sorry," Jack scoffed, his voice filled with bitterness. "You're sorry? For what? For getting caught? or for spending years lying to me, to Emily, to everyone. Lisa sobbed, her hands shaking as she clutched the paper. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Jack. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, Jack snapped, his anger finally boiling over. You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed us. You lied every day. You looked me in the eye and lied. How could you do this, Lisa? How could you throw away everything we built? I don't know, she whispered through her tears, her voice cracking. I was lost. I didn't know how to stop. Jack laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Lost? That's your excuse? You've been lost for years while you were sneaking around, meeting him, planning your future? I love you, Jack, Lisa sobbed, her face crumpling. I swear I do. Love? Jack's voice was a cold, harsh whisper. You don't betray someone you love. Lisa fell to her knees, weeping as the weight of her actions crashed down on her. But Jack didn't move. He stood there, staring down at her, feeling no sympathy, no compassion, just a cold, bitter emptiness. I've already spoken to a lawyer, Jack said flatly, watching her face crumble further. You'll be hearing from them soon. Emily stays with me. You've already lost everything, Lisa. I hope it was worth it. And with that, Jack turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Lisa sobbing on the floor, surrounded by the evidence of her own destruction. Jack stood there, his heart pounding in his chest as Lisa's words echoed in his mind. She had been cheating on him before their wedding, before they had even said their vows. It wasn't just the years of betrayal that hurt. It was the fact that their entire marriage, everything they had built together, had been tainted from the very beginning. He felt sick, his stomach churning with a mix of rage and disbelief. So what was I, Lisa? Jack asked, his voice trembling with barely controlled anger. A backup plan? A safety net in case things didn't work out with him? Lisa shook her head furiously, her tear-streaked face filled with regret. No, Jack, that's not it at all. I love you. I always loved you. But I was scared. I didn't know what I wanted. And when I met Mark, I got lost. Lost? Jack spat, his voice full of venom. You weren't lost, Lisa. You knew exactly what you were doing. You were making choices. Choices that betrayed me. Betrayed us. Don't act like this just happened to you. Lisa sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands again. I didn't know how to stop, she whispered through her tears. Every time I tried, I couldn't. I didn't want to lose you, Jack. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did, Lisa, Jack said, his voice hard and cold. You hurt me more than I could ever put into words. You destroyed everything we had, everything I thought we were. And for what? For some guy who made you feel alive? Lisa looked up at him, her face drenched in tears. I know, she whispered, her voice full of despair. I know I can't take it back. I know I've ruined everything, but Jack, please, please don't give up on us. Jack's chest tightened, the weight of her plea pressing down on him. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand how she could ask that of him after everything she had done. But instead, he just stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, his mind racing. Don't give up on us, Jack said, his voice shaking. Lisa, you gave up on us the moment you decided to sleep with him. You gave up on us when you lied, when you kept going back to him, when you put his needs above our families. Lisa sobbed, her hands trembling as she reached out toward him. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted it to be like this. I made a mistake, Jack, a terrible mistake. But I love you, and I want to fix this. Please, Jack, just give me a chance. Jack stared at her, feeling torn between the overwhelming betrayal he felt and the lingering love he had for the woman he had built a life with. But the love felt different now, tainted, twisted by the lies and the secrets that had festered between them for years. He didn't know if he could ever look at her the same way again, if he could ever trust her. I don't know if I can, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Lisa. You've taken everything I believed in, our marriage, our family, and shattered it. How am I supposed to come back from that? Lisa's tears fell harder, but she didn't move, didn't try to defend herself anymore. She knew there was nothing she could say that would make things right. All she could do was wait, hope, and beg for Jack to give her another chance. But Jack wasn't sure if he had anything left to give. I need space, Jack said finally, the words coming out heavy and thick with emotion. I need time to figure out if there's anything worth saving here, because right now, I don't know if I can ever look at you and not see the lies, the betrayal. Lisa nodded slowly, her face crumpling in defeat. "Take all the time you need," she whispered. "I'll be here, Jack. I'll be here waiting. I'll do anything, anything to fix this." Jack didn't respond. He turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Lisa behind with the wreckage of their life scattered across the table. As he made his way to the bedroom, his mind was a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, sadness, regret, and somewhere deep down, a flicker of something else. Maybe it was hope, but it was buried so far beneath the rubble of their broken marriage that Jack couldn't be sure if it would ever resurface. For now, all he knew was that the woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted with his heart, had betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. And as much as he wanted to believe in the possibility of forgiveness, the road ahead felt long, uncertain, and full of painful questions that might never have answers. As Jack sat beside Emily, her small hand wrapped around his finger, he felt the full weight of his decision settling on him. The gravity of the situation felt unbearable, and for a moment he wondered if there was a way to shield her from the pain that was inevitably coming. But there was no escaping it. No matter how much he wanted to protect his daughter, the reality of what Lisa had done would fracture their family forever. Jack brushed a tear from his eye and kissed Emily's forehead. She stirred slightly, but her peaceful slumber continued, oblivious to the turmoil that awaited them. Jack knew he had to be strong for her, even though every part of him felt shattered. His mind raced with questions about the future, about custody, about co-parenting with Lisa, about how they would navigate the mess of their broken marriage. He couldn't help but feel lost in a sea of uncertainty. Pulling himself away from the bed, Jack left Emily to sleep and quietly closed her door. The hallway felt colder, lonelier, without the sense of stability that had once defined their home. He moved through the house, his footsteps heavy as he made his way toward the living room. He noticed that Lisa's purse and keys were missing from the entryway. She must have left sometime during the night, unable to bear the confrontation any longer. Jack's mind swirled with a mix of emotions. He was angry, furious even, that she had fled, leaving him to carry the burden alone. But at the same time, he felt an overwhelming sadness. This wasn't how he had envisioned their life together, and now everything they had built, every moment they had shared, felt tainted by her betrayal. Sitting down on the couch, Jack rested his head in his hands, trying to process the enormity of what lay ahead. He had told Lisa he would file for divorce, but the thought of following through with it felt like ripping out a piece of his soul. Still, he knew there was no turning back. The marriage they had was irreparably broken, and the trust between them had been shattered beyond repair. Hours passed as Jack sat in silence, staring out the window as the sun rose higher in the sky. He knew he couldn't delay the inevitable any longer. Emily would wake up soon and the day would begin, despite the emotional wreckage he carried inside. He needed to be strong for her, even though he felt anything but. With a deep breath, Jack finally stood up and made his way to the kitchen. He would figure out how to explain things to Emily when the time came. For now, he needed to hold on to the one truth that remained unchanged: his love for her. No matter how broken his marriage was, no matter how much his world had crumbled, Emily was his anchor, his reason to keep moving forward. As he prepared breakfast, Jack couldn't help but wonder what would come next. The road ahead seemed uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, he knew one thing for sure: he had to rebuild his life, not just for himself, but for his daughter. And somehow, no matter how long it took, he would find a way to piece together the shattered remains of their family. When Emily's footsteps patted down the hall and her sleepy voice called out, "Daddy?" Jack turned, his heart swelling with both love and heartache. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, offering her a warm smile. "Come here, let's have breakfast." As she climbed into his arms, Jack knew that despite the pain, despite the uncertainty, he would find the strength to carry on. For her. Because that's what she needed, and that's what a father does. As Jack held Emily close, feeling the steady rise and fall of her small chest against his own, he struggled to keep his emotions in check. He hated that she was caught in the middle of something so painful, something that she couldn't possibly understand. But he knew that this conversation, as difficult as it was, wouldn't be the last. There would be more questions in the days and weeks to come, more moments where he would have to balance honesty with protection, all while trying to navigate the crumbling pieces of his own life. The next few days passed in a fog of paperwork and legal proceedings. Jack met with his lawyer again, going over custody arrangements and the division of assets. The discussions were straightforward, but each conversation felt like another nail in the coffin of the life he had once cherished. Lisa had reached out a few times, mostly through text, asking to talk or to see Emily, but Jack wasn't ready for that yet. He needed space, needed time to process the enormity of the situation without her presence clouding his thoughts. In the quiet moments when Emily was asleep and the house was still, Jack would sit on the couch, staring at the empty space where Lisa used to sit. He wondered how everything had gone so wrong, how the woman he had loved and trusted for so long could have betrayed him in such a profound way. It was a question that haunted him, one he knew he might never truly have an answer to. One evening, as Jack was tucking Emily into bed, she looked up at him with those same big brown eyes filled with worry. "Daddy, are you and Mommy ever going to be happy again?" she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. He wished he could give her the reassurance she needed. But the truth was, he didn't know if happiness was something he and Lisa could ever find again. Their marriage was beyond repair, and while he knew he had to focus on creating a stable, loving environment for Emily, the idea of happiness felt so distant, so unattainable. "We're going to do our best, sweetie," Jack said, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Things are going to be different, but that doesn't mean we won't find happiness again. It'll just be a new kind of happiness." Emily nodded, though Jack could see that she didn't fully understand. How could she? She was just a little girl, caught in the middle of a situation she had no control over. But Jack made a silent promise to himself right then and there. He would do everything in his power to ensure that Emily felt loved, secure, and safe, no matter what the future held. After leaving Emily's room, Jack found himself standing in the hallway, staring at the closed door of the bedroom he and Lisa had once shared. The memories flooded back, of late-night talks, shared dreams, and plans for the future. All of it seemed so far away now, lost in the wake of betrayal and broken promises. As Jack turned off the lights and headed to bed, he knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. But for Emily's sake, he had to keep moving forward. He had to find a way to rebuild, even if the pieces didn't quite fit the way they once had, and maybe, just maybe, in time, they would find their new version of happiness. As Jack sat with Emily, holding her close, he reflected on how far they had come. The journey through the storm had been long and painful, filled with heartbreak and loss. But now, sitting in the quiet of their home, he felt a sense of calm and closure. The anger and resentment that had once consumed him were no longer at the forefront of his mind. Instead, he felt gratitude for the bond he had with his daughter, for the strength he had found within himself, and for the new chapter that lay ahead. In the months that followed, Jack and Emily settled into a comfortable routine. Their days were filled with school, work, playdates, and the small joys of everyday life. Jack continued to focus on being the best father he could be, and in doing so, he found himself healing more and more each day. He took Emily on weekend adventures exploring parks and museums, and even signed her up for dance classes, something she had always wanted to try. As for Lisa, she remained a part of Emily's life, but Jack had set clear boundaries. Their interactions were civil but distant. He had come to terms with the fact that their relationship would never be the same, and while the pain of her betrayal hadn't completely disappeared, it no longer defined him. Jack knew that he had done everything he could to protect Emily and to give her the stability she needed. That was all that mattered. One evening, after putting Emily to bed, Jack sat on the porch, sipping a cup of coffee as the sun set in the distance. He thought about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead for him and Emily. There would be challenges, of course. Raising a child on his own wasn't always easy, but Jack knew that they would be okay. They had made it through the worst of the storm, and now it was time to embrace the calm. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt truly hopeful. His life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was his. And as he watched the last rays of sunlight fade into the horizon, he smiled, knowing that he and Emily had built something strong and unbreakable. The future was theirs, and Jack was ready to face it with open arms.